big day of news. I'm sure Sean would have loved to cover the big things that have taken place on the US sanctions on Russia. So today, I think we will dig deeper on what it really means for the so what, and are there any significant signals to watch. I have the best of the guests today with Ian, with Neil, and probably Narendra would also join as well. So I want to start the day, Neil, with you. You are in that part of the world, probably watch Russia very closely. Do you really see impact of these sanctions on the Russia's production side? Because both of these companies, which have been targeted, cover about 45% of the oil production. How do you see the numbers getting impacted on the production side? What's your first take?
Well, my initial feeling about this is that you wake up one day and you read about the complete reversal about what you believed when you went to bed. I mean, not that long ago, it looked as if Ukraine was going to get long-range missiles. Then we find that Putin wants to talk. So now we find that those long-range missiles are off the table, and there's now pressure on Ukraine. The next day, we now have pressure against Lukoil and Rosneft. Now, the issue about this is it's whether sanctions are enforceable. And this has been the problem all along since the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war. That announced sanctions is one thing, enforced sanctions is something else. And the idea that there will be a sudden change, i.e. a fall in Russian production and exports, I think is rather fanciful. This is a means by the US to try, I assume, to bring Putin to the negotiations, which seem to have stalled. Whether it will have any impact in the real oil market in the short term, I very much doubt. Although, of course, needless to say, in the world of oil trading, we've seen the Brent price come up pretty sharply this morning, I think over 3%, something like that. And, we'll just have to wait and see whether there is actually any teeth to these sanctions at all.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that let's still again wait and watch. It's not the big market thing. Of course, the prices have moved about 4% up today. Do you see prices touching 70s? And then I want to come to Ian and ask a similar take on the oil price or the gas side. So do you see a 70 coming?
Well, only if there were to be a very, very dramatic fall in actual supply to the market. That's the thing. And, we have, we're talking at the moment about a supply glut, although I think that talk is actually overdone. But, we are seeing strong production in the United States and Brazil and Canada and Guyana and in other places. The OPEC plus countries are, in theory, adding more barrels to the market. So there is plenty of supply out there. And I think it would take an amazing change in the global supply picture for the price to be heading back to 70 and above. We'll just have to wait and see. I think we're calling that perhaps a little bit too soon.
Okay, I take that, Neil. And let me ask Ian, how do you read this? Any special things you're seeing in these sanctions which are different from the past, whether it's on the oil side or the gas side? So what's your first impressions?
Well, I think Neil covered it pretty well. But when I'm looking at gas side right now, one thing that we've learned over the past several years is that there are occasions when some elements that are tangential to gas fundamentals do manage to spook the gas market, particularly in Europe. And so it's never surprising to see, perhaps a short-term spike in prices on this sort of news. But we've also learned that prices do come down rather quickly afterward. And one of the things that we're watching right now is as we're entering the winter, the fundamentals are really at the heart of our expectations for prices. We're looking at European storage, which is disappointing, but not disastrous at this point. We're looking at new supply that's coming on, through the end of this year and into next year, and we believe those factors are probably going to be more critical than some of these other elements.
I want to come back to Ian a little later. I want to ask, what does it mean from a US side? Is this something going to be a big opportunity for the US exporters? Because now, if Lukoil and Rosneft's gas doesn't at all come to Europe, I don't know exact the numbers, but That's the question I want to ask. But before I go there, Neil, I'm missing Narendra, but maybe you can provide a take. I have learned from different sources that now Indian refiners are probably in a bind because they asked for sanctions and they got the sanctions. So I'm hearing that the oil flows will probably have to go down, of course, probably in a phased manner. What's your take now, India and China's position? Who will buy, who will not buy the Russian barrels if they really get produced and make it to the water?
Well, I think, well, let's take India and Russia together. India, as we all know, has massively increased its shipments from Russia since the invasion. Next to nothing before the invasion, I think 50,000 barrels a day on average in 2021. And at times, the shipments to India from Russia have touched 2 million barrels a day. And of course, for India, it represented an enormous commercial opportunity, and in fact, an unmissable commercial opportunity to get their hands on regular supplies of compatible quality crude at advantageous prices. And India has taken advantage of that commercial opportunity. And I believe actually it will largely continue to do so.
Okay.
In the case of China, obviously, there's a much bigger picture here of the overall trade relations between the United States and China, the Trump tariffs, which seem to be on off, a bewildering array of various percentages applied from various dates. We talk the possibility of Trump meeting President Xi. We'll have to wait and see if that happens. But China, I think, is a much bigger picture than India because of this because of this huge dispute about US-China trade, which is not to say that US-India trade is unimportant. Of course it is. India is a rising economy. India is becoming increasingly important on the global stage in many aspects of geopolitics. So we're not minimizing it. But as far as India is concerned, I would have thought that India would continue to take Russian barrels. And if the volumes of Russian barrels does diminish, then of course there are plenty of barrels now coming out of the Middle East, or there is plenty of availability from the Middle East. So India is in some respects is probably in quite a good position. But I think
Well, that's an interesting take, Neil, that India can still, if the barrels make it to the water, get produced, India could still buy. Is that despite the sanctions? Because so far what I've learned is that China has bought Iran barrels under sanctions, but India has a position that if it is sanctioned, then we don't buy.
Well, the Russian oil, of course, has not been sanctioned as such. Russian oil has been subject to the price cap, which, of course, as we all know, has been largely discredited because, because of its initial construction and the fact that it's very difficult to verify, because of the cheating that we all know goes on with fake paperwork and all the rest of it. But as far as the Indian position is concerned, we will just have to see now that the devil is always in the detail with these sanctions.
Yes.
And there is the commercial reality of the contracts that Indian refiners have with Russian suppliers, how quickly how long does it take for those contracts to wind down? In the interim, as we all know about oil refineries, that the refiners are used to a certain diet of crude in their refineries to produce the product slate that they find desirable. And these things do not happen overnight. If in fact the Indian government does decide to direct the Indian companies to no longer take Russian supplies, and I'm not necessarily sure that will happen.
Well, that's a perfect timing, Narendra, to bring you in. We've been talking about the sanctions, and Neil just shared his view around what India could do. And I think the key point made is that India will still do what is commercially good for the country. So, Narendra, what's your first impression? What's your first take? How will India deal with this challenge? Because India asked for sanctions, India got some sanctions. Your take?
Well, we have seen the reports. In Delhi, we are waiting for further, details in terms of when you say sanctions against Rosneft, which, as you know, also owns a big refinery in India, or sanctions against Lukoil, which is present not only present in 40 different countries and is a private player. So we are still waiting for further details. But as far as India's overall thinking policy on this issue is concerned, it's very clear that India is going to take all decisions based on its own commercial, economic interest and energy security. And we are a large country. We have our own relationship with Russia. And Russian President Mr. Putin is scheduled to visit India within the next few weeks in December. And Indian government and Indian establishment is preparing for the visit. And President Trump is traveling to Kuala Lumpur, and we still don't know whether our Prime Minister would be present. But at the same time, we've seen some progress in between India and the United States on the trade talks. Because all this Russian thing is nothing to do with Ukraine as far as India is. It's all about the trade. They are using Ukraine purchases from Russia in order to put pressure and extract the best deal. That's what America is trying. We all know that. So there is some good and positive progress on that, and we will wait. Then if, for instance, America agrees to give, let's say, to bring down the tariff from 50% to 15 or 18%, I think that's going to be a good progress in that direction. Let's
Good
not
progress.
forget. Russia is important, but the US is equally very, very important for India. So India wants to maintain a deepen relation with the US, but at the same time, to telling India that don't do this and don't do that, that's not the kind of culture India subscribes to.
No, I tend to agree with you, and I think that's the delicate balance we will see unfold. But let's bring our survey questions, if I can get it on the screen, and viewers, put your votes in. These are important votes. I think your opinions matter. So let's see what is the most likely to reach a trade agreement at upcoming ASEAN, US China, US India, both, neither, and I'm sure there are other permutation combinations possible. So please do put your votes, and before the call, we'll bring the results in. Let me bring, I think Neil made a comment, the devil is in the detail, right? So I think so far what I'm hearing from all three of you is that, yes, let the things unfold and you don't see. Is there, Ian, anything devil in the detail which we are missing out or which we might be surprised if we find out later? Anything from your side?
Well, I think there are two points here. I think one, just reiterating what I think we've already said, is that that I do think we need to let things unfold. I think it's still very early, to really fully understand what's going to happen, and that links to the second thing, which is, and that is, if you've been paying attention to U.S. trade policy and the Trump administration over the last 8, 9, 10 months, you'll see, in fact, that there is certainly potential for fairly rapid change in policy. And and I think when we're out there and trying to really understand how things are going to happen, I think that's the one thing we can really count on, is that you haven't heard the end of of any recent announcement. And that's
okay. So you haven't
probably,
heard
I
the
think
end
that's
of
probably the key factor that's worth keeping in mind. And that's I think that's really important before we, I think, jump to any conclusions.
Any take on the gas side? Because I do see that this could be an opportunity to provide some more support to the US gas or LNG picture. Do you see that way, that this will excite them, or not yet?
Well, I think the market conditions really speak for themselves in this regard. And I think we're seeing that the way the market dynamics have really played out have shown how Europe remains really a key market, helped by lackluster Asian demand. And ultimately, this is really, in terms of talking about devils in the details, I think that these market conditions are really going to be, really the key driver. Now, having said all that, clearly, the geopolitics of it all over the last couple of years have also put the market in its current position. And so I'd say that's really what we need to pay attention to. And really, it's a really interesting time to ask that question, because we're right now on the cusp of the winter season, and into 2026, we're really starting to get into the next LNG supply wave, which will further alter those dynamics. And it's important to keep in mind that certainly when you have abundance, a lot of those issues really start to change, and particularly with lower prices and greater availability of supply.
Okay.
So
So I think a key point, yes, the market conditions, and probably you're saying that we might get caught in a bit of a air pocket, but new supply is coming in 2026. Let me get back, Narendra, back to you. I understand that Trump initially tried to put pressure on India to get Putin to sign a deal, and now it is probably putting a pressure on Russian system to get India to sign a deal. And I don't know what other big announcements which we can see before we land a deal, because I do remember that India was the first one which everybody was hoping for a deal. And will India will be the last big deal of the 2025, or you don't think that way?
I think there will be some kind of breakthrough simply because India is very keen to deepen relationship. We need American capital, we need American technology, and we also need America's kind of, overall, when you look at their idea of the Indo-Pacific, which includes Quad, some kind of security umbrella for this region that, goes from India right up to the United States and the entire Pacific. Is very, very important for us because the real threat to India is, as you know, China. And the rise of China, we thought it would be a benign China, but we know by now that it's not benign China. It's probably going to be hostile China. So in that case, we need the United States much more than many people are actually able to realize at this stage. So that's very important. But at the same time, India is very sensitive to its strategic autonomy. We want to see a strong Russia. A strong Russia is basically good for us because a weak Russia means Russia and China emerging as a kind of one big force. So our effort, part of the strategy is to wean Russia away from China to the extent we can help it, facilitate it. That's our strategy, and that's what has been conveyed to the US and Western Europe. But the biggest challenge that we see today is Western Europe. Western Europe, out of the whole picture of President Trump's effort to find some kind of breakthrough with Russia, Western Europe is coming in the way. They have their own idea. They have their own kind of, if I may use the term, hatred for President Putin in particular and Russia in general. And they have their own view of Russia, which many of us sitting outside Europe find difficult to understand. They are both Europeans, Russia and why can't they sit across the table and find a European solution to Ukraine? So we are at loss to
That's an
understand.
interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is what it is. So we think that, while keeping an eye on Russia and keeping an eye on Washington, D.C., actually is important for us to keep an eye on Brussels, what they do, and Britain, London, what they do. So far, it looks like, the winner is Western Europe. Their worldview and their Russian view has prevailed, on President Trump. President Trump is failing, and Western Europe view of Russia is succeeding. Is
I
it
have
good
to
for the
bring
world?
Neil
I have my
on
doubts.
that.
I mean, that's what it is.
So no, I think you're saying there is a breakthrough, and India and US can probably do a deal if Western Europe doesn't come into the picture. Neil, do you agree, disagree? Any different views on that?
Well, I do disagree. Well, disagree. My dear friend Narendra obviously is sitting in India, and that is a very different perspective from someone sitting here in Paris. My view is very simple, is that Russia has illegally seized land from Ukraine. We can talk forever about the history and whether there is any long-term historical justification, but they illegally invaded a neighboring country. They seized their land. They have taken actions which have led to the deaths of many, many thousands of people. My feeling about this is that Western Europe, whatever India or China or the United States might think, should not let this stand. And my feeling as a European citizen is that our European leaders have essentially failed to step up to the plate. We're still talking 3.5 years on into an illegal war about sanctions against Russia, measures that should be taken. The United States obviously has feet in every camp in the world, whether it be Europe, India, China, everywhere else. And I understand the role that they are playing. But essentially, the United States should be standing up for the freedom of Ukraine to manage its own affairs and to be free from invasion.
So thanks, Neil. I think you completely, you put your point that Europe actually should have stepped up more. Narendra, I want to come to you indeed, but before that, I want to, because this is an interesting point. of Europe standing in between what India and US and then maybe US and China want to do. Ian, do you agree, disagree?
Well, again, I think one of the interesting things to consider here is really getting a handle on really what it would take for basically, what the Trump administration really undertake to get to get a ceasefire at the very least done in Ukraine, and that is still subject to question. I mean, just have a look at the policy shift over recent months, and you'll find that it's very difficult to really see. I mean, you're going to have a change in viewpoint from the Trump administration depending on the day of the week at this point, and I think that really adds an element of uncertainty,
So,
into this
so I
bigger
think,
picture.
okay. Well, Narendra, I was with you in Fujairah, and we had our dear friend from China as well on the stage, and that was really a conversation. If you were in his shoes today, right, I want you to answer that question from his perspective. After seeing the latest sanctions on US and Russia, what would he be saying? What would be his take? Is that something you can attempt?
Well, Mahesh, the point is, when it comes to China, I never go by what they say. I always go by what they do. So what
Okay.
they say officially has no significance. The fact is, out of all this, the stand taken by America, stand taken by Russia, stand taken by Ukraine, and particularly Western Europe, the winner is China. China is smiling all the way because China is the winner. As an Indian, I am for freedom and democracy all over the world, including Ukraine. But my only point is that the issue is Ukraine, which is in Europe, and Russia and Western Europe, they are in Europe. Why can't they just sit across the table, find a solution? Why do they need America? Why do they need India or China? So before commenting on India, China, or America, any country, it's a European problem. Find a solution. You've been around for decades and centuries. That's point number one. Number two is that if Europe tomorrow it doesn't succeed in emerging as the second largest economy in the world, which is it has potential, and to go for 5% GDP spending on defense, for that they need to strengthen their economy, and they cannot strengthen their economy, make their economy world class, and bring a manufacturing back without affordable, or let me use the term, cheap energy, and cheap energy can come only from Russia. So sit across the table, find a solution which is democratic, which is a win-win for all, and strengthen Europe. Strong Europe is good for the world. Otherwise, China is going to give you tougher time than Russia is giving. So please
Okay.
look at it very carefully. And the last line I want to say is this: that look, the whole world now, the kind of scenario we have got here, Europe needs to come out of is they're very stubborn. They need to look beyond Europe, look at the whole world, work backward, find a solution which is a win-win for the whole world.
Thanks, Narendra. Now, I think, again, an interesting take. And what I'm hearing, I was trying to get to a point on whether we will see in the rest of 2025 any deals done. And I think the message that's coming loud and clear is India thinks Europe is in the way. Maybe Europe thinks India and China is in the way, and US thinks both are in the way. So I think this is kind of I would say, a stalemate situation. Let's bring our results back if we can have on the table. And the next, I want to ask the so what of the questions, what kind of trade ideas or trade thought process, which the all market and all trading community needs to watch. We have a very clear picture here. It's a deal that India and US might strike, and or a neither option. But I think I'll go by, as Narendra was mentioning, that there might be a breakthrough. So let's go around the table. Any winners, any surprise trade opportunities or market situations you have in mind, which you want to tell and share?
Well, surprises, no, but by their nature, a surprise, is something that we haven't, we can't really forecast. The fact that there is the summit, I think, is very important. It is in everybody's interest that the uncertainty that has been created by the Trump administration so far in 2025 vis-a-vis tariffs, it is in everybody's interest that that be settled soon. If there are going to be heightened tariffs along the lines that we've seen so far this year, then so be it. But just tell us what the rates are, what they are applied to, when are they applied from, and let's have some kind of certainty so that we can move forward.
Okay, you're asking for certainty.
Well, yeah, I
Okay.
mean, what's so terrible about that? We want businesses, governments, economic interests all want to have as much certainty as possible so they can carry out their affairs.
Getting
What we have seen
certainty
in
from US, Neil,
2025,
would be the surprise.
well, we're all over the place, unfortunately. The surprise, I guess, would be that we come out of that summit or by the end of the year by other means with a greater degree of certainty. That would be the win-win for everybody. But we shouldn't be in this situation in the first place, but we are where we are.
Okay, get your point that a certainty could be a surprise. Ian, any surprise from your perspective, which the oil market, the gas market community needs to watch?
Well, and I think I agree with Neil here. Our expectation is that we're in a scenario right now which is extended uncertainty. So even though that's not a great answer, our scenario takes into consideration that this is going to continue to limp along, and we should expect that there may be some deals here and there. But we're also keeping in mind that in spite of this extended uncertainty scenario, that there is still a chance that things could get worse. And you can have a worst case where there's a escalation in trade tensions that really hits everything. And that, I wouldn't call that the possible surprise, but I would say that should be something we shouldn't ignore.
Rule out.
And
Okay.
I wish it could be more optimistic, but unfortunately,
No.
this is the situation we find ourselves in right now.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask Narendra the same question and be ready to answer as well. I'll ask you your oil price takes and give you the last word to each of you. But before that, Narendra, any surprise which the oil markets or traders need to watch?
And not really, because my sense is that President Trump may do whatever he's trying to do, maybe very unpredictable and called by any name. But the fact remains that he would not like to see oil prices going beyond $62 per barrel on sustained basis. I don't think he can afford it. His constituents, his voters, they like cheap oil. And President Trump himself is trying his level best, to the best of my information, to bring actually oil below $60 per barrel. And if you go by demand and supply fundamentals, oil should not be even today more than $61 per barrel. Brent, I'm referring to. So I think given that that's how he thinks, and he wants manufacturing back, and he wants American economy to do well. So oil at $60 per barrel, that is goal. Any geopolitics that leads to oil going beyond $65, 66 on sustained basis, I think then he's going to rework his diplomacy. Now, so
Okay.
that's a good point. The only worst point is that we have to see what happens to China and Chinese economy in particular. That's a very critical factor. And also we have to see how he handles. I think so far he has handled things as far as geopolitics reasonably well. Like in India, we are quite hopeful there will be a breakthrough. And if there is a breakthrough, that would also be a kind of template which would be available to other countries, other partners of America, particularly that how to deal with him and how to build a way forward.
Okay, well, we have got 2 minutes to go. And my question to all three of you is that we have seen certainly the oil prices are down year on year about 12 to 13%. They are down by 6% month to month. And today they have increased by 4%. So where we are now, close to 65, are we going towards 70 or are we going back fast towards another 60? Yes and no takes. And I think very quick takes, starting with Neil first from you. 70s towards or towards 60s very soon?
I think we're going to stay roughly where we are. I'm a believer that the underlying strength of global oil demand is stronger than most analysts have been projecting. We have yet to see in physical stock numbers evidence that this massive wave of supply that we're told is heading our way is yet to impact on actual numbers. So I am rather more bullish than most, but I'm not so bullish that I believe the price is going to climb through 70 and above, unless, for once, sanctions against Russia do actually lead to a significant fall in production and exports, in which case, yes, $70 might happen, but there's a long way to go.
65, stay there. Ian, towards 60s or?
Yeah, and very quickly, our expectation is that that Brent will average 65 in 2026. So I think that's pretty consistent with what we're talking about here.
Okay, Narendra, I can guess your answer that you are probably in the camp that oil prices, this rally will fade fast, and we are heading back towards the 60s and might
I,
get to 62.
Yeah, I would say the band, let's say band of $62 per barrel to $68 per barrel. And because all said and done at the same time, President Trump loves two things, cheap oil and Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay, well, I think we can wrap it up at that point of time. Thank you, all of you. I think this was really a great session. I'm sure Sean would have given a different spin. I tried my best. Enjoy the rest of your day and keep watching the markets. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mahesh.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.